Good morning. How are you? I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is Friday morning, November the 20th at 8:30, isn't it? We're right on time. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We do need two amendments, Madam
Don't we need to
Chair,
amend?
before if you don't mind withdrawing your motion, Mr. Pless.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, so we want to adjust the agenda, and are there items that we want to add?
Madam Chair, I'd like to add the item of a reconsideration of the plan of support for schools identified by the State Board of Education as low performing.
I'll second.
Thank you, thank you. Is there an objection to that? Okay, so we have a second, Mr. Pless. And are there other items that we want to place on the agenda? The agenda?
Yes, Madam Chairman. I'd like to move that we join the improper equipment lawsuit as discussed with our attorney in closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good. Any opposed? So now I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so item number 1 on the agenda is reconsideration. I'm going to ask Dr. Baldwin to talk to us about this, please.
Madam Chair, I had the opportunity to go back and watch our previous school board, especially focusing in on the discussion that we had regarding the low-performing schools and the plans that were submitted for your consideration. And my strong hope is that if there are any healthy discussions that take place across this state regarding that particular law, especially in relationship to the formula and the calculations that are used, I hope that Pat Bryant's very eloquent statement that initiated the discussion here, I think it's a primer to be used. I think it identified extremely well, in a very concise manner, what the key components that need to be addressed and reviewed. And you've heard me on multiple occasions advocate for the changing of the formula to portray a better balance. I think that at least gives a better level playing field for those smaller schools that have a higher at-risk populations of students, especially from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And I say that in that I don't want to disregard the comments that were made from the other board members. I would probably characterize them as much more emotional, but you know that's okay, because I think what that does in balance to what Mr. Bryant stated, I think it makes the impact of those grades real to everyone. And I especially believe that those comments made it real in representation of those two school communities, specific to Johnston and Irwin Middle. So I think they're very important as well. Now, as much as I can assure you many, many others in this building, in this central office, champion the concerns that were initially brought up by Mr. Bryant, as superintendent of this school system, I have got to say that I cannot advocate to this board any type of decision that disregards the law. We are in schools every single day, and I think it's our obligation to model to all of our students, those 24,500 students, that yes, there may be components of law that we disagree with. We question the merits of entire laws, but there is a process to go through to argue and to make efforts to change that law. One of those is in front of you today, a resolution. And in that resolution, I believe it has been written, and I want to thank our instructional team here at Central Office for helping us develop this. That was the request that came to myself and our Central Office from the last board meeting. I think this is a model of, in a democracy in the United States, this is a start for that voice. And I think that voice is loud and clear. And I believe resolutions like this can be that little seed that starts in a few systems in this state and can grow. So I say that again in terms of my role as superintendent, and I will tell you that first and foremost, my job is to ensure that we do follow the laws, regardless of the questions that we may have about them. And my voice, I assure you, will be loud and clear on any future discussions regarding the grading system and especially regarding the formula and the calculations that are used. I will promise you that. So, Madam Chair, that's, I appreciate giving me an opportunity.
Yes. Other board members have items, discussion?
In reference to,
The motion,
well, we don't have a motion yet, I don't think,
On the
do we?
performance plans.
yeah,
You can entertain a motion at any time.
okay.
Madam Chair, I have a question. I don't know if superintendent can answer it or not, but has anybody had the opportunity to play with those percentages and numbers a little bit and compare schools? And I'm just wondering, where would these two schools stand if you were to do a reversal and do 20% proficiency and 80% growth, or even 50% of each?
I do not know if you reverse them so that it was 80% growth. I do know that our testing director, as well as that curriculum team, actually projected from last year's scores or performances what a 50-50 split would be, 50% snapshot performance, 50% growth. And in both of those cases, those D schools would have moved into the C rank. So it did make a performance. And again, that's just, in the school business, it makes sense. Because for those schools, it truly is all about growth. It is where that student starts day one and what is done in that classroom when the year ends in terms of the improvements. And you've heard me say this before, that is at the core of learning. It's not about snapshot, although that's part of the accountability system, and that cannot be, never be thrown away. But I would argue that growth certainly should attribute to a higher percentage than 20% of that particular grade for the school. So we did do those, but we did not reverse it.
And in some of our schools that were B schools, I guess the same could be said then, that if you were to do the 50-50, maybe they wouldn't be B schools, maybe they might be lower.
There was definitely a positive trend if it were a 50-50 model. Again, we're not necessarily advocating 50-50, but we are advocating that we represent growth higher than 2 out of 10.
Well, I just believe that we need to represent what is actually going on, and not some perception, again, of the General Assembly based on a test that's administered over just a couple of days. Again, I just feel that that's not a true picture, and for me to sit here and agree that they're low performing is a lie. I've seen lots of information out there that tells differently. And I know we talk about being emotional, but I am emotional about this because I don't see the failing school. And I can't sit here today and say that I agree with this plan as the way that it is written. I appreciate the resolution, but the very things that are in this resolution are also the reasons that I can't agree with approving this plan. And maybe I'm not the person to sit on this board today if I'm breaking a law. But sometimes you have to stand up, and this is where I'm at. Because unlike some of these people that are in the General Assembly right now, I believe that you can change those kids, and you can help them, and their scores can improve, and their grades can improve, so that they are better students, but they're not failures. The school's not failures. You know, my dad, he saw what a school was being labeled as failure. And he and several others took it upon themselves. Now, my dad's not in education. He wasn't. He's in the medical field like me. But he saw what happens when you tell those little children that they're not good enough. And so instead of my dad going along with the public and with what his state, was trying to say, he grabbed a bunch of people, they locked arms, and they marched to that school to help those kids. And I've said it before, it's the best thing that ever happened to my father. And I cannot honor his memory by agreeing with this today. I'd love to. I'd love to follow the law. But I can't do it today. So I'm very sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Churchill. Do other board members have things they'd like to say?
Madam Chair, if it's okay, I have a couple thoughts. I appreciate, Dr. Bowen, I appreciate your thoughts and your words, and I've struggled with this for exactly what you said. Been on this board now for 9 years. The problem, as I've tried to think about this and work my way through it, is that we've had a lot of things in the 9 years I've been on the board come at us from the state of North Carolina. Some we've had input on, some we haven't. Some they've listened to us on, some they haven't. This particular activity, for a lot of reasons that I stated in the earlier meeting, I'm opposed to. But the main thing is, it's the first time I really remember, and I'm getting old so I may have forgotten, but it's the first time I really remember, this to me bypasses us as a board. This is the activity of labeling and stigmatizing schools and kids and communities bypasses us as a board, in my opinion, and it goes right to those communities in these 2 particular schools, which next year could be 2 different schools, it could be 8 schools, it could be no schools. And I just can't support that. And I understand where Ms. Churchill's coming from, but for me, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And I took an oath, and I understand that, and it's hard, it's difficult, to uphold the laws of the state of North Carolina. But I also took and was elected by the people of Buncombe County. And for me, I'm not, where we stand now with what's on the agenda, I'm not going to support us reversing our vote, okay? The other part of it, which I had mentioned before, is the timing of this is just ludicrous. I mean, I mentioned the days before. We got this initially from the state of North Carolina, 31 days into the school year. If the state of North Carolina and the General Assembly is generally concerned about our schools that aren't doing as well as others, then they take some action and they present to us something that our superintendent and superintendents across this state could work on in the summer months, so that when day one started in those schools, if we're really trying to help them and be equitable for those kids in areas of low-performing schools that maybe have whatever we identify as the needs, then okay. If they had stuck this into the budget like they did at the end in late September and said, beginning in the 2016-17 school year, I'd have had a whole lot less problem with it. But that's not what happened. We have, and have for all of our schools, school improvement plans in place. And I would advocate that we not change our vote, we consider the resolution, and that we be in compliance. If my understanding is correct, and maybe the board attorney can say to me, what I've read is the state has asked for a plan, and we have school improvement plans in place, and we take those school improvement plans that existed when the school year started, and that's what we send to Raleigh. That would be what I would advocate for.
You want to respond to that?
That may be sufficient, because all they've asked is a plan in regard to performance. I think the performance plans in which have been prepared by the superintendent in the central office are on a template provided by DPI, but there's nothing that requires that particular template to be used. I think that was just guidance with DPI trying to help local school districts meet its obligations.
Thank you.
So, if I'm interpreting what you're saying, we could approve the plans that were in place at the beginning of the year and, in your interpretation, meet the law?
I believe so. It doesn't ultimately mean that the State Board of Education can't review it and send it back to you. Now, I will say is, most school boards have been sending a preliminary plan before they, most superintendents' office have been sending a preliminary plan prior to those plans being submitted to the local board and then to the state board. And I believe that Dr. Baldwin and Ms. Swanger have done that as well. So they have already technically submitted the plan and received comments from DPI staff before it came to you all. So they have already done that. But ultimately, the State Board of Education is asking for an improvement plan or performance improvement plan. And that's up to this board to decide what, as the governing body of this organization, to determine what that looks like and what to submit.
And what are the dates on that request and submission? And so I'm guessing then if superintendents have submitted across the state a preliminary plan, there was probably something in the statute that said within 30 days or within 15 days or some amount of time.
Yeah.
And then what are the dates that are attached to that afterwards? Whereby
5 days from the
a
vote.
final plan has to be submitted to your board for approval and.
I'd have to go look. I know there's 5 days for the preliminary plan, then it comes back to you all. I'd have to go back and look. I'm going to look it up right now.
Do I have?
Yes, please.
I have the statute here. First, in addition, within 30 days of the initial identification of a school as low performing by the local school administrative unit or the state board, which again is
That's
Mr.
the
Bryant
October
pointed
1st
out.
date.
That's correct. Whichever occurs first, the superintendent shall submit to the local board a preliminary plan for addressing the needs of that school, including how the superintendent and other central office administrators will work with the school and monitor the school's progress. Within 30 days of its receipt of this plan, the local board shall vote to approve, modify, or reject. Before the board makes this vote, it should make the plan available to the public, which was done. And the board then shall submit the plan to the state board within 5 days of the board's vote. The state board shall review the plan expeditiously and, if appropriate, may offer recommendations to modify the plan. Local boards shall consider any recommendations made by the state board. That's the statute.
Madam Chair, may I speak?
Yes, please.
I've been giving this a lot of thought since we met last, and have spoken not only to Dr. Baldwin, but to teachers and principals in our system, and have thought a lot about what my responsibility is as a member of this Board of Education. And at the end of the day, I feel like my responsibility is to uplift, protect, and support Buncombe County schools. And there are various ways that I could do that. One way I can do that is by advocating for what's right to our legislators, and I feel like the resolution that's been written here clearly states what I believe in terms of what is best and how our schools should or should not be graded. At the same time, I feel like this legislature is engaging in some bullying behavior, and as the protector of this school system, I need to stand in the way. And one way that I can do that is by voting for this plan, which I plan to do today. And in so doing, I am voting for the plan. I am not voting for any labels. I am addressing that when I vote for this resolution. But it is my responsibility to protect and support and do whatever I can to help the schools of Buncombe County. And so that's what I plan to do today.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Question for Dr. Baldwin. Dr. Baldwin, the plan, these improvement plans that we are discussing today, even though we got these marching orders from the DPI or via the legislature in late October, this school system, your staff had already taken steps and actions to initiate improvement methodologies in those schools to advance those schools along, even before you were asked or told to do this. Is that correct?
And I think that is an absolute essential point to make, that if school systems across this state waited until October 1 to then respond to all of the schools within their systems in terms of the improvement, the projections that we have to make schools better, it would be absurd. So you're absolutely right. The efforts toward support for not only those two schools, but other schools, this is just 1 year. And while those two schools were reflected on performances from 14-15, that may completely change based on performances this year. So that process has continued. Nothing's changed. This legislation didn't all of a sudden say to Buncombe County schools, you now have to really focus on your schools. And to focus on only 2 out of 42 schools is absurd as well. Our charge very clearly is that we focus on all of our schools, because all of our schools, even our 2A schools, have opportunities for improvement. Where we have lower performance in this school system, it sure does indicate that we have to look at that in terms of how do we better support. But I can assure you that curriculum instructional team, one of our principals is sitting right there. There has been multiple discussions along with that particular principal, as well as her peers across this school system, sitting down, not beginning the first day of the 15-16 school year, but once the 14-15 school year ended, we were now moving in terms of what do we do to improve our performances. And that has taken place for decades. This is not just something that we have been now pressured to do. That's why I'm truly proud to be at the head of this school system. This is what I think has kept us as one of the high-flying systems in this state.
So you said that we have had for years, and particularly this year, there's a continuous improvement model in place. Your system is constantly reviewing things, looking how to do things better. And when I looked at the first of the resolution, the amendment states the superintendent submit to the local board of education preliminary plan for improving the school performance. We have that in place. That's something that would have gone on whether this board acted or not. Now, sort of where I'm going with this is their request that this be done. Apparently there may be, and I can't speak to other systems, but maybe there was some question as to whether or not it was being done, whether or not there are those continuous improvement processes going on elsewhere. I don't know. But it seems to me like that if it was already in place and we were basically just sharing that information with them on 2 schools, we could share it with all of our 43 schools if we so desired. But we're sharing that information that was already there. Although those 2 schools were sort of segregated out and made to jump through some additional hoops, which really distracted from staff time and resources and that kind of thing for them. That's unfortunate. But I say that to say this, that with that, it seems to me that all we're being asked to do is give them the plan, show them the plan. And I think maybe that with this resolution written as it is, and it's a fairly strongly worded resolution, I think if they take time to read it, it would be very clear our position on it, that we do not favor this labeling. We don't favor the stigmatism of these students and of these schools. And as I said at the last meeting, you keep telling people they're bad. I don't know how long it takes before they start believing that. That's not how you coach a team. You need to look at where you can, if there's room for improvement, we need to identify what that is and act on it. So that would be my comments to this.
And specificities to the plan may vary from school to school. And why is that important? Even though we are one school system, each and every school has some unique properties to it. But understand that regardless, the standards are still maintained for each and every school. We don't adjust the standards based upon the population of students in the schools. If we did that, I think it would be a terrible disservice to that school community for that particular school. So the standards remain high. And that's at the core, again, of what we do when we sit down and begin that planning early in the summer for the upcoming school year.
Other board members?
Just a clarification on Mr. Bryant's point. You're suggesting that our plan be the plan that's already in place that we send to the state. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And to get, what's that?
We've already sent both at this point.
Yes.
And to get there,
Let me make sure I understand. What I'm suggesting is that the plans that were in place that Dr. Baldwin just referenced that take place in the summertime and those school improvement plans that are in all of our schools, that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Not the exercise that took place after beginning October 1st and moving forward.
Tony corrected me in that what's been sent. Is that correct?
Right. We have not sent, according to this legislation, we have not sent let me back up. We have sent drafts to the Department of Public Instruction. We received some feedback, which in looking at that feedback, I think it was, I would not argue with the questions that were asked and refining those. We have not sent specific to Johnston and Irwin Middle School those plans. A solid majority of what's included in those plans for each of those schools was part of the development that took place this summer. I think that's what you were asking, Mr. Queen. But we have not sent these two in the final version back to DPI as required by this legislation. Did that clarify? Okay.
may I ask Dr. Baldwin a question?
Certainly.
I'm leaning, I'd like to hear your input on using the summer plans that we had, because I'm leaning that direction. It seems like, from what Mr. Bryant says, I'm in agreement. I mean, it's crazy to get this legislation in the middle of the school year. I mean, obviously, we're already following plans. We had plans in place. It's only logical that, and we had good plans in place. So I'm leaning towards what he had to say.
Right, and the process is a collaborative process. It is not just our curriculum instruction team going to Johnston Elementary and sitting down and saying, here's our plan. It really starts inside that school, because there is a clear structure of the principal and a school improvement team and teacher leaders at all grades and what we call our professional learning communities. All of that has to happen first, and it makes sense. It's not a top-down process. So, and the other thing to keep in mind is we could submit a plan. We could submit a plan today. 2 months from now, there's additional data coming into that school that could change what that plan indicates. So at best, when we sit down in that summer and we put something on paper, realize that it's simply guidelines, but as more and more data, as things change inside that school building, it's a very active process. So what that plan looks like, if you simply just make the plan in June for this particular year and you don't continue to review and adjust it, fine-tune it along the way, again, you're not doing your job. So it is a very active process. It's almost like that snapshot we're talking about. It's much more complex than, here, boom, here's a plan on paper, and this is how it's going to work. It doesn't work that way. We're dealing with young people. We're dealing with staff inside that school. We're dealing with individual classrooms and different makeups inside that classroom. It can change, and it probably may change on a daily basis as far as that goes. But that's the beauty of it. That's where the professionals come in. They respond to those changes that are taking place in their classroom.
Because that's a living document.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Madam Chair, one other thing I would like to just mention. We were all fortunate to attend the State Board of Education meeting in Greensboro. Attended a session there, and the gentleman there was talking about communicating with your elected officials, with your legislatures and so forth. And he said something that struck a nerve to me, and that was that, you know, and this was actually a keen topic of discussion in that session. But he said, talking about how to approach, how to discuss, how to have conversation with the legislature. And he was giving some ideas and pointers. But he said one thing that you never want is for your local legislature to go and vote contrary to what your board believes, the Board of Education for your county believes, and then when asked why they voted the way they did, said, well, nobody ever told me about that. Nobody from the board ever contacted me, et cetera. And I feel like that, you know, we're sending this as a message. Whether or not this gets read and taken seriously, I don't know. But what I would like to at least put on the table is that we very nicely ask our local delegation if they'd be willing just to come and have a conversation with us. So that they'll just be clear that, you know, why we're taking this action, why we've done what we did. So they will know our feelings quite clearly. And then when it comes time that they have a vote on this matter in the future, maybe some of that conversation would help direct them and give them information as to really what we feel like. And we feel like we're communicating the wants, needs, and desires of our school system, okay? We're closer to that system than they are. They got lots more things on the table than our school system. But we're at least, I feel like we got fingers out there and we're hearing the conversation among the principals, conversation among the instructors, the teachers, the employees. And I think we could communicate that to them, but at least I could check off that box in good conscience and say, they know, we've told them. And I would just like to put that out there for consideration and possible further discussion.
We'll certainly take that under consideration and see what we can work out.
Thank you.
Yes. We've all had a chance to speak. Personally, I prefer to be in compliance with the law. Even though it bothers me sometimes when I'm driving, I do prefer to be in compliance with the law. And I would like for this board to approve the plan that our staff has worked on. And then I'd like to send this resolution to the appropriate people. So that's where I'm coming from, and I would entertain a motion from the board, whatever.
And me and you voted the same last time. I'm curious your thoughts on submitting the summer plan. What's your concern with
I
doing
believe
that?
we're splitting frog hairs, if you want to know the truth.
They're basically the same.
I do. And I believe that we have anguished, and I believe anguish is the appropriate word, over this decision. And I believe that I would like for this board to support our staff and what they've done with the school and these teachers and students, and to put it down on a piece of paper certainly does give it validity in my mind.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the plans as they have been presented to us.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Madam Chair, I would ask for
Oh, sorry. Yes,
for a showing of hands during this vote,
okay.
so we make sure.
They can what?
He can call for us.
A show of hands, that's fine. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed? 2.
Madam Chair, I'd like to note for the record, my opposition is not to our staff, superintendent. My opposition is to the way this was brought to us by the state of North Carolina. My opposition is based on the fact that I have confidence in Dr. Baldwin and his staff and the principals of our schools that they were already doing this prior to this being brought to us. And my opposition, quite frankly, is to the state of North Carolina as well to send us another unfunded mandate. No programming with this, no personnel with this. And when we get into this, to the resolution in a minute, I'm going to ask the attorney for some clarification on a couple of the statutes that are referenced, because one of the statutes that we reference in the resolution clearly states that if the state is indicating that schools are low performing, they will provide resources to assist the local, the LEAs in helping those schools not be low performing in the future. So that's where my objection lies. It's not an objection to Dr. Baldwin and his staff and these plans, because I'm like you, I do think we're splitting hairs. However, I agree with Mr. King, or Mr. Queen. I told you guys I'm getting old.
you
I
don't
agree
know.
with Mr. Queen in that we send two different messages depending on which of these we adopt. Now, we've made our vote, but one, in my opinion, would have sent a stronger message than the other. So I just want that for the record.
Thank you. I have said this before, and I'm going to say it now. It is such an honor to serve with a group of people on this board that takes this decision as seriously as we have. And it is a testament to the commitment that we have as board members to Buncombe County Schools, to our administration, our teachers, and our students. And I can't say that any more emphatically, but that is truly how I feel. You guys are wonderful. Notwithstanding, we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is the resolution itself. I'm glad I said that before we get in this conversation. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
I move that we approve the resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Pless. Now, is there discussion from the resolution?
I would be curious, from our board attorney, we referenced the appropriation amended 115C 105.37A. As I read, help me to understand, does that mean it's eliminated that statute? What exactly does that entail with the amendment? Because 115C.105-105.37A is the one I was just referencing that discusses quite plainly what school improvement teams should do in terms of reviewing those plans and then assistance to schools that are low performing for 2 years. And I just want to be clear as to what the Appropriations Act that we're discussing from Session Laws 2015-241, it amended this statute, but what exactly does that mean to us?
The amendment of that statute is what, basically what you all just did. It amended that statute to include all this procedure. I've got it.
Okay.
It amended that statute to include all the procedure, what you pretty much just went through to develop this plan. Superintendent submits it to you, and then you all submit it to the state board, however you approve it, modify it, or reject it. And then the state board can review it and send it back to you as with its stamp of approval or with proposed amendments, and you would reconsider. I'm looking for the part in regards to what you said about the funding.
Well, if a school that has received state-mandated assistance is designated by the state board as low-performing for 2 consecutive years or for 2 of 3 consecutive years, the state board shall provide a series of progressive assistance and intervention strategies to that school. These strategies shall be designed to improve student achievement and to maintain student achievement at appropriate levels and may include, to the extent that funds are available for this purpose, and I get why that's in there, assistance such as reductions in class size, extension of teacher and assistant principal contracts, extension of the instructional year, and grant-based assistance. That's B in that statute.
B, okay. A1 is what was ultimately amended.
Yep.
So B, I don't believe was amended. Hold on, I'm flipping back and forth between the old and the new.
And the language is may. It doesn't say they're required, correct? To provide funding.
Shall.
Yeah.
I understand that. It's a cover. It
Right.
provides.
I mean, I know
it
why they
provides
said it,
cover.
but-
It provides cover. I get it. I just wanted to know, does it eliminate B or not? It doesn't seem to me that it does, but I just was curious.
It doesn't eliminate B, it does amend B.
Well, it amends A, for sure.
Well, it amends A, A1, and B,
Okay.
all 3 subsections of that statute. Because you're looking at 37, correct?
115C-105.37A is what I'm looking at. And under that, B.
Oh, you're looking at 37A, not 37. I apologize, hold on. It does,
And
I
I'm-
don't think it amends.
And I'm referencing the number that's in the first paragraph of our resolution.
See, this is.
I'm looking at the wrong thing. Inform
Yeah,
me.
there is 115C 105.37 capital A,
Yep.
and then what was amended was 105.37 subsection A. Does that make sense? Those are 2
Does.
separate statutes. From what I remember, and I'm going back and I'm looking, 105.37 capital A, which is a totally separate statute, was not amended,
Still in place.
still in place. 105.37 subsection A, subsection A1, and subsection B were amended, but you're looking at a completely different statute. You're looking at the next statute in the sequence.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm going to pull it up because I've got them right here if I can find it. Those are all the 5.37A. Okay, as I look at a list of the statutes, I don't find a small a. I'm looking at 115C, it's a whole list of them.
Are you looking at the list of the statute?
.37,
You'll see.
.37 capital A, and then I get to .37B, .38,
I think it's under this one.
Yes,
under here.
the little a is a subsection, so
Gotcha.
it would be under statute.
Gotcha, I have found it. Thank you very much.
Got it. That's what was
Needs to be
amended.
A.
The statute you just referenced, the one about continued support for schools designated as low performing, has not been amended.
And that was the reason for my question, was to clarify whether, in theory or not, the support from the state for those low-performing schools and some of the items that are mentioned has not been amended.
Correct.
Gotcha, thank you.
Other questions by board members? Now that the attorney's been to the test?
I hope I passed.
You did. It's been called to my attention that there's a typo in the third whereas, about halfway down the first line. It has AL, that should be changed to LA. Oh, Lord. It has been noted, thank you.
Should be changed to A1.
A1,
In the third.
instead of AL, it is A1.
It's A1, it's not just A, it's A number one.
Yeah.
In the parentheses there? Is that what you're talking about?
Okay. And that's been noted? Thank you. All right. Other comments or questions by board members?
Madam Chair, before we vote, is the plan to actually read this resolution today to the public out loud?
I have no plan to do that. Would you like to have our attorney read this?
I believe that if we're sending this resolution, I believe the public needs to hear the words that are in the resolution. I think they're very powerful words, and they should be spoken out loud.
I don't mind reading it, but it's very long, so I'm going to read it quickly.
Wait just a minute. I've heard him read
Make
quickly.
any adjustment on the
Ending paragraph.
ending sentence, is that?
Dr. Baldwin's asking if you want to make any adjustment on the ending paragraph, the in summary, in regards to what you've done. Considering that the previous vote was split, I would suggest leaving it alone, because I think all of you like the resolution as it stands, if I'm not mistaken, based on your comments, whereas there was a split vote on the actual plan. So I mean, but it's still, it's majority rules, so whatever you all want to do.
What's the
You
pleasure?
can think
of the-
about it while I read it. How about
Oh,
that?
thank you very much.
Resolution of the Buncombe County Board of Education regarding the preliminary plan of support for schools identified as a state board as low performing, whereas the Appropriations Act hereinafter, the Act of 2015, North Carolina Session Law 2015-241, amended North Carolina General Statute 115C and 105.37A to require the State Board of Education to identify as low performing any schools that received a performance grade of D or F and a school growth score of met expected growth or non-met expected growth as identified by North Carolina General Statute 115C 83.15. Whereas on October 1, 2015, the State Board of Education identified 2 schools in Buncombe County schools as low performing according to the identification criteria in the Act. Whereas by amendment to North Carolina General Statute Section 115C 105.37A1, the Act requires the superintendent to submit to the local Board of Education a preliminary plan for improving both the school performance grade and the school growth score of low performing schools, including how the superintendent and other central office administration will work with the school and monitor the school's progress. Whereas the Buncombe County Board of Education strongly opposes the low performing school identification criteria set out by the North Carolina General Assembly for 2 reasons. 1, it relies on unfair measurements that are heavily weighted on proficiency, thereby penalizing higher poverty schools. And 2, it fails to distinguish a school that has met expected growth from a school that has not met expected growth. Whereas the only factor used to determine proficiency is the result of end-of-grade and end-of-course tests, which are administered only a few days out of the entire school year. Whereas the school performance grade calculation formula used by the State Board of Education is 80% proficiency and 20% student growth. This formula places too much emphasis on proficiency and fails to account for other significant factors that impact student learning, such as lower socioeconomic diverse communities. Identifying the school as low performing based solely on end-of-grade test results does not fairly fairly represent the total school performance. Whereas the State Board of Education's school performance grade calculation is not an accurate measure of student performance in schools, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction acknowledges this in the January 2015 publication entitled 2014 Ready Accountability Background Brief Supplement, North Carolina School Performance Grades, whereas it states, school performance grades are one component parents and school community may use to determine how students in their schools are doing in comparison to those in the district and across the state. It's also important for parents to consider student performance on end of grade and end of course assessments, as well as other indicators that the state uses to determine college and career readiness. Whereas the Buncombe County Board of Education also disagrees with the low performing school identification criteria set out by the North Carolina General Assembly because it fails to distinguish schools that have met expected growth from schools that have not met expected growth. Whereas schools that are meeting or exceeding expected growth should be commended, school growth demonstrates that the students in those schools are progressing towards proficiency. Whereas schools that have met expected growth should never be identified as low performing. Of the 2 Buncombe County schools identified by the State Board of Education as low performing, 1 met expected growth in 2014 school year. Labeling schools as low performing serves no positive purpose for students, staff, and communities. Whereas receiving the state's identification of schools as low performing on October 1, 2015, the 31st day of the school year, negates the urgency for improvement. Logic indicates a plan for improvement begins day 1 of the school year with multiple stakeholders involved within the planning process. Whereas the Buncombe County schools provide support to all schools based on multiple indicators of data and in the best interest of students. Therefore, be it hereby resolved by the Buncombe County Schools Board of Education as follows. Number 1, the school improvement process in place requires all schools to analyze data, create SMART goals, and develop focused strategies to address student achievement. In 2014, schools presented school improvement plans to a review committee for progress monitoring. Every year, at the midpoint and end of year, principals are required to submit written progress reports. All school improvement plans align with the district strategic plan and include the following district-wide initiatives to impact student achievement. A, common instructional framework. Buncombe County Schools has adopted a common instructional framework that sets expectations for every classroom. Daily, every K-12 teacher is expected to develop standards-based lessons with student-friendly learning targets. The daily agenda, including learning targets, guides each lesson. Student engagement includes reading, writing, listening, thinking, and moving on a daily basis. B, professional learning communities, or PLCs. In the summer of 2015, PLC leadership teams from all schools received additional district training utilizing a results-oriented PLC framework continuum, which connects the PLC team's work to student learning and achievement. Ongoing training and support continues throughout the 15-16 school year with the goal of building capacity of teachers, leaders, and administration to maximize the fidelity of PLCs. Quarterly progress monitoring by curriculum staff is aligned to the school improvement process. C, professional development. For 2015-16, professional development is focused on developing quality learning targets. Instructional coaches and curriculum specialists provide targeted staff development on unpacking content standards so that student-friendly learning targets can be developed. The emphasis of the training has been on the student's understanding of what is to be learned, which increases the relevance of the curriculum for the student. Administrative walkthroughs support the fidelity of the implementation. D, data analysis. Buncombe County Schools applies the use of data analysis sequence model, or DASM, to facilitate data conversations and strategic decision-making with district and school-level staff. All schools have received in-depth training on the model to be utilized with data review and implementation of goals and strategies to ensure promoting student academic progress. And E, digital learning initiatives. The implementation of the one-to-one digital learning initiative provides all students with laptops over a 4-year period beginning with 4th through 6th grades in January 2016. Implementing this plan ensures students will actively engage in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, or STEAM, across the curriculum, leading to a world-class global education. Blending education strategies together, or BEST, professional development for Buncombe County Schools staff began in 2015 and continues. The goal is for all students to graduate as high-achieving and globally competitive learners with 21st century skills. And finally, number 2, the Buncombe County Board of Education is committed to continuing the school improvement process. Buncombe County Schools relies on data and research that suggests performance grades and school growth scores for all schools, including the 2 identified as low performing on October 1. Will be positively impacted as long as the district stays engaged in the continuous improvement process and initiatives as described. In conclusion, Johnston Elementary School and Irwin Middle School are receiving additional coaching and instructional support, targeted professional development in reading and math from state and international consultants, intentional PLC consultant support, and the district-level progress monitoring as part of each school's improvement process. In summary, the Buncombe County Board of Education strongly opposes the North Carolina General Assembly's identification of low-performing schools. This process labels and stigmatizes students, families, and staff members who are part of these schools and communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shatley. So we have a motion and a second. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The resolution passes. We have another item that we have added to the agenda entitled Improper Equipment, and Mr. Shatley.
I'll take it from here. Thank you, Madam Chair. As I kind of briefed you in closed session, in 2012, the Richmond County Board of Education filed a lawsuit against the state regarding certain fines for improper equipment imposed by district attorneys and local court systems were not coming back to the local school boards pursuant to the North Carolina Constitution. They were victorious in that lawsuit, and the right to appeal finally diminished at the end of last month. We have, most school districts around the state are joining in what is hoped to be just a very brief lawsuit in order to recoup those funds as well. I'm happy to entertain any questions. If this is a lawsuit that you want to join, it would require a motion, a second, and being approved in open session.
I have a question, Madam Chair. So just to clarify, this does not have anything to do with improper equipment in our schools, is that correct?
Correct. Thank you for that question. It is about when, like, you get a speeding ticket or some other kind of moving violation, and that fine, if you pay the fine goes to the local school board. But if the district attorney dropped the fine to something like a charge of improper equipment, that was not going to the school board.
So it's a moving violation.
Yeah, it's the improper equipment in a speeder's car, that sort of thing.
Not to be pointing fingers at any of us.
I'm sure we all have had a speeding ticket,
Yes.
except for Dr. Baldwin.
That's right. So, hearing that information, is there a motion from the board to join this suit?
I'll make the motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pless. Is there a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Are you in a hurry to get out of here? Yeah. You're like a worm in hot ashes. You did a good job.